questions. I'm very pleased to invite to the stage Chris Dougal, Nicolas Bassan, Rudiger Strempel, and Justine Boissard. Thank you for your warm welcome of our 4 colleagues. And if you do you can welcome them now. If you sit in front of your face, which sounds a little bit strange to say. Please forgive me for the lack of eloquence on that, but you understood. That makes it just as easy for everyone in the room to understand who each person is. I'm very happy to welcome you to this round table. We're going to talk about marine spatial planning, landscape, and implementation support. We're going to remind very briefly of which organization you work for. Thank you for your patience also, because we had a great first round of presentations. I'm going to turn to my colleague Chris McDougall first, of the European MSP platform. You're a project leader. I would like to ask you a general question based on the experience in EU member states. What key lessons can strengthen the integration of marine data into national maritime spatial plans? That is the broad question that I would like to ask you, Mr. McDougall. There is a microphone on the table. If you guys also need a glass of water, don't hesitate. Thank you for being with us.
Is it on? Yes.
It is on, great.
Thank you very much, Henri, for having me. And forgive me, I made a few notes because I'm not a data expert by background. I've learned what I know now from my colleague André, who you'll have the pleasure to hear from later. As you said, I'm here representing the European MSP platform, and through that the technical expert group on data for MSP, which we act as a secretariat for. I think drawing on our experience from the European MSP platform and from the TEG, I would highlight maybe 3 practical lessons. And I'm very pleased that the presentation from Marina just sort of reinforced them, so I feel a bit more confident on that. The first, I think, is the integration works best when the data is actually framed as part of the planning process and not as some sort of technical prerequisite that's added on at the end. So some of the most successful marine spatial plans we've seen tend to involve planners, sector authorities, and data holders from the outset. And that the data informs the different trade-offs, scenarios, and as we heard this, in the future, these sort of what-if scenarios, and actually building the data in from the outset. Secondly, I think, and hopefully people will agree, I think there's been a shift away from this idea of perfect data. That we continue trying to collect data and create more data and actually hold off launching the planning process. And I think what's really important from the MSP perspective is that data is clearly documented, it's interoperable, and it's transparent. And in that I mean that we're really clear on where the gaps and the uncertainties are in the data, which allows planners and decision makers to make the best use of that data. And I think hearing today obviously about EMODNet and in particular Copernicus, and I think referring back to the question from our French colleague, back to Marina, member states being allowed to or able to use these national and European data sets and models can really speed up the process because it moves their energy away from data creation and onto sort of the interpretation. And I think finally sustained integration is as much about the governance and training and skills as it is the technical platforms and innovations. And I think certainly we've seen that member states can really benefit from the exchange of best practice, webinars, guidance, and I think through expert groups, as Andre will talk about the technical expert group later, we can really build confidence, I think, in using data for the planning process. So I guess my takeaway is that the lesson is not just good data integration, it's not just a technical challenge, but it's actually a social and institutional one. And I think that's where these support mechanisms can really add value. Thank you.
No, thank you. And without preempting too much on other short interventions, our discussion. Maybe do you want to talk about maybe one challenge that you see, notably in this main lesson that you're giving us, which is it needs to be part of the process in the beginning and not as a prerequisite? Does that make you think of any specific challenge that you've encountered?
A specific challenge. I guess in a way they're sort of linked, which is the reason we get bogged down on this idea we need more data, we need to create more data, we haven't got enough data, I think is the way the data is, the way it's available. So I think we've talked and we've looked at how we can make the data more easily available. We can have it in a format that it makes it more easy to use. And I think, as I said, touched on this idea from our French colleague, that services like Edito and the European Ocean Eye will hopefully make this data sort of available to member states in a way which they can make use of it straight away, and it can inform these planning decisions. So I think it's not necessarily about more data. It's the way it's available, the way it's stored, the way it's presented, but also people's confidence in actually using that data.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm on first name basis sometimes when I get into the discussion. It is by no means a lack of respect. Thank you very much for taking offense to that. I'm obviously very much pleased to be with such high-level panelists today, and obviously stay with us. Chris, I take away, I appreciate what you said, the clarity with which you said this idea of perfect data that we need to reconcile with. That is not, and that's something that maybe others want to also rebound off of, and then you mentioned the exchange of best practices, which is a good way for me to introduce Nicolo Bassan into this discussion. Thank you for being with us of the IOC UNESCO, and a broad question for you as well, Nicolo. How does, by the way, you weren't here when I went around the room, Nicolo, from Italy, so one more country also we can kind of check the box of in this room of great diversity of countries participating in this workshop. Thank you for being here. How does MSP Global contribute to international coordination and this exchange of best practices, which we just talked about? You also, I'm going to preempt, you're going to talk about the launch of an online course in a couple of instances. So thank you very much for Nicolo for being with us.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Henry, and thank you, Mercator, for the invitation. Well, as you might know, MSP Global is a joint initiative between IOC UNESCO and the European Commission, and it focuses on supporting the implementation of MSP worldwide. So it tries to somehow echo the efforts also of the European Commission in terms of MSP implementation worldwide, together with the reach of IOC and its 152 member states. We're currently in the third phase of the program, and we work at global, regional, and national scale in terms of support to MSP together with partner institutions and organizations. And most of the work that the program does, it's focusing on providing then international standards and guidance, such as the flagship publication on the International Guide on MSP, which was recently also complemented by 2 additional volumes of the guide, one focusing on biodiversity inclusive MSP and one on climate smart MSP. And I'm really glad that the Slido was actually mentioning climate change as an important aspect to incorporate in MSP, and that's where we've been working also together with the European Commission support, based on the MSP roadmap, so the framework of collaboration with the European Commission. So these 2 new volumes are complementing the MSP International Guide, and we are currently working also on an additional 4th volume focusing on land-sea interaction, and will be soon then opening online workshops to gather inputs in this new guidance that we'll be working on. But we've been also delivering specific guidance on, for example, engaging indigenous people and local communities, on sector-specific engagements such as the offshore wind sector. We're currently launching the work, we'll be soon launching the work on engaging the aquaculture sector. So I think a lot of good synergies could be built up also with partners in the room. Recently, during the second phase of the program, we also launched the rapid assessment methodology, which aims at supporting countries in developing an MSP action plan. This was implemented in several countries in West Africa, for example, in Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana. In Brazil, in South America, in Thailand, and we're currently finalizing the process in South Africa and Fiji. And we also invite partners and countries in adopting the methodology to really push forward and advance the MSP process. And of course, the data toolkits. So we've been, in the last phase of MSP Global, we've been developing 2 data toolboxes, one on spatial data infrastructure for MSP and one on ocean observations for MSP. And we're currently working on an additional data toolbox on cumulative impact assessments. So this is, let's say, the support in terms of at a global scale and also at the national scale in terms of practical support. But also at the regional scale, we work towards cross-regional and transboundary cooperation, facilitating exchanges of best practices and discussion among member states. This is done through initiatives such as the MSP forums, which are international and regional, but also through specific trainings and capacity development activities. So we also work on that phase in terms of capacity development at regional and national scale. We will, of course, work and support our regional subcommissions in establishing then specific task teams and expert groups on MSP, and we try to coordinate and have a coherent approach in terms of MSP among the member states and the region. So this is, in a nutshell, where we're working. I'm happy of going more in detail in next phases.
Can you talk about this online course that you are launching as well?
Yeah. Well, the 2 data toolboxes that were developed during MSP Global, the second phase of MSP Global, we're currently launching very soon, so please stay tuned, an online training on the 2 data toolboxes, specifically on data for MSP. It will be freely available on the Ocean Teacher Global Academy. It's thanks to, of course, also the support and the contributions of many experts and global experts, some of which are here in the room with us. So I would like also to thank very much the global community of experts on data that contributed to the data toolboxes and also to this online course that will soon be launched on OTGA and through our channel. So happy to follow up.
Thank you very much, Nicolo. Obviously, stay with us because I might ask you to follow up with a couple of details about the toolkits, and we're going to keep moving now. And obviously, we wish the best launch of the online course. Thank you for being with us, Rudiger Strempel. You are the Executive Secretary of HELCOM, the Baltic Marine Environmental Protection Commission, which is known thus as this Helsinki Commission, an intergovernmental organization and a regional sea convention in the Baltic Sea area. We're going to talk about regional cooperation with you and with your colleague on the left, Justine Boissard. So we have a very nice sequence of this roundtable as well. The Baltic region, it's a good example, if not I wouldn't say perfect example, but pretty close, of regional cooperation with regards MSP. Do you want to talk a little bit about the achievements, but also maybe the challenges for this regional cooperation, after reminding us of maybe just briefly of what the HELCOM comes out of and what its main goals are? Thank you, Rudiger.
Thank you for that question. Thanks for having me, and good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here in Brussels today. So maybe for the benefit of those who are not that familiar with the Baltic Sea, and I assume that among the 700 people online and maybe even some of the 70 here in the room, there will be some who aren't. Let me start by setting the scene and explaining what the Baltic Sea actually is and why it is so much in need of MSP, actually. So Imagine a small, semi-enclosed regional sea with a water residency of 30 years. 30 years. It's very shallow. The average depth is only about 50 meters. It's one of the largest brackish water areas in the world, which means we have a wide array of organisms that are either at the limits of their salinity tolerance or actually specifically adapted to these conditions. Now imagine this sea being surrounded by a catchment area 4 times the size of the sea itself, extending way beyond the actual HELCOM area. Home to 85 to 90 million people, busily going about their lives. It's a very economically vibrant region, of course. We have 7 major rivers flowing into the sea from that catchment area. Major rivers being the operative word because there's more than just those 7 big rivers. Well, in addition, it's also, and for some of these reasons, it's one of the busiest sea areas in the world. So we have, on average, 1,500, 1,500 large vessels. By that I mean IMO registered vessels out there at any moment out on the Baltic Sea. IMO registered vessels. So that doesn't include military vessels, smaller fishing vessels, research vessels, leisure craft, of which we have an enormous number, of course, out there as well. So you can imagine that the Baltic Sea is under considerable pressure. We also have, by the way, of course, a lot of offshore infrastructure. We have subsea infrastructure. We have subsea munitions, submerged munitions, which are a major issue in the Baltic Sea. And of course, we have some unprecedented security imperatives as well now. So all of this just to set the scene. So this sea, obviously a busy sea, a small sea like this, a vulnerable sea, needs maritime spatial planning. So are we doing that? Well, the Baltic Sea is sometimes hailed as a front runner in maritime spatial planning. And with all due modesty, there is something to that. Because we've been working on MSP for, roughly 2 decades. And we have a very well-developed institutional structure. So in addition to a regional sea convention, HELCOM, which is the organization I represent, we also have a very renowned spatial planning organization, an IGO in the Baltic Sea region, VASAB, Visions and Strategies Around the Baltic Sea. And they engage in terrestrial as well as maritime spatial planning. And then, of course, we also have the European strategy for the Baltic Sea region, the first macro-regional strategy of the EU, which has a spatial planning facet, which also includes maritime spatial planning. Now, these 3 are also nicely interlinked because HELCOM and VASAB maintain a joint MSP working group. And this MSP working group, in turn, is then the steering group for the maritime spatial planning facet of the EU SBSR as well, policy action spatial planning. So all this is well interlinked. Plus, of course, we have European legislation, and HELCOM is a platform for European legislation in the Baltic Sea region. So that's our institutional framework. But is it actually doing anything? Well, and the answer is yes, because we've developed a variety of policy instruments related to MSP. So we have our Baltic Sea Action Plan, which also focuses on MSP. We have the regional MSP roadmap, which was developed jointly by VASAB and HELCOM. We have the guidelines on the ecosystem-based approach in maritime spatial planning, which was developed in 2016, is now being revised and due to be published in the latest version this year. So we have quite a lot going on there. We have the base maps, data infrastructure, and so on. So all of this is in place. Well, and the challenges are, of course, now, or one of the main challenges that having this in place is the next step. Having an institutional infrastructure is one. Having these policy instruments is the next, and implementing them is, of course, the actual challenge. So that is something we are now doing. And, of course, our focus has shifted. In the past decade, we were looking at establishing maritime spatial plans. Countries around the Baltic Sea have them. We have all these policy instruments. Now they need to be implemented. The maritime spatial plans need to be implemented. They need to be monitored. They need to be reviewed as we move into the next MSP cycle.
Excellent. Thank you very much, because you did well to bring us first to the Baltic Sea and the understanding of the complexity. I was unfamiliar with so much, I would say, traffic of different types of activities, obviously not just traffic of transportation, but we're talking about a lot of different interests and stakeholders to work with. So stay with us, because we're going to use that then to talk about how we extrapolate from a case study such as this one in the importance of regional cooperation. And we're going to continue on that theme with Justine Brossard. Thank you very much, Justine, for being with us, of the CPMR, which is the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions. Thank you all for always, if you can, reminding what the acronym stands for. That just helps those that that are following to continue to stay as engaged with us as possible. You can remind us of what the CPMR does, obviously. You work on the Ocean Act as well. And maybe let's talk about the role of coastal and maritime regions in MSP. Thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm very happy to present the work of the CPMR on MSP. So yes, CPMR stands for the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions. So we are a membership organization, and we are a network of around 140 maritime regions, and our main goal is to raise the voice of maritime regions. The CPMR has been quite much, let's say, involved in the discussion related to MSP, in particular the future revision of the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive. For example, in 2022, we joined the project called the Regina MSP to assess the role of the regions in the MSP process and, let's say, highlight their specific role in that. Regarding the Ocean Pact, Ocean Act, first of all, I would like to mention that the CPMR now is a member of the Ocean Board, so that will give us, let's say, another opportunity to enter into a sort of technical discussion on the implementation of the Ocean Pact and also on the elaboration of the Ocean Act that will include the revision of the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive. Regarding the role of maritime regions, it is true that in many member states, the process, the MSP process, is coordinated at the national level, so it's quite, let's say, centralized. But through our work in Regina MSP, we could highlight that they can play a critical and important role in MSP. First of all, I would like to highlight that, let's say, that the regions, they act as a good scale, good interface to have a more, let's say, balanced approach when it comes to MSP, because in one country you can have regions in the Atlantic or in the Mediterranean, and what is happening in the Atlantic is not the same as what is happening in the Mediterranean. So thanks to the regions, we can adapt, let's say, the MSP plans to these diversities, let's say, and avoid a sort of like fully uniformed approach. And of course, regional authorities, they have a couple of competencies that are extremely relevant to translate EU policies at the local and regional level. For example, they develop a couple of policies for the development of the territory, also some policies and strategies for the protection of the coastal and marine environments. So they have a key role in that. And one aspect I would like to particularly stress, it's related to stakeholder engagement. One good example is in France, because some French regions, they have created a sea parliament. So it's a sort of very informal institution, let's say, to gather all the stakeholders from the territory, so maritime stakeholders, including sometimes a citizen, to enter into an early dialogue to discuss, to raise some concerns, some needs, some challenges, and also it's a good way for the region to get access also to those stakeholders, to know them. So in that way, they play a key role. And lastly, I would like to mention, of course, on sea basin cooperation, that they play. They are very good interlocutor, let's say, to when it comes to the implementation of this regional cooperation in the MSP directive. Because at the CPMR, so we operate through the General Secretariat, but we have also geographical commissions, including the Baltic Sea Commission. And through this experience, I mean, we can show that gathering all these regions together from a specific sea basin help to develop this cross-border cooperation. They develop projects that are co-funded notably by Interreg programs. So they are, let's say, key actors to implement this cross-border and sea basin cooperation.
Thank you very much, Justine. Before we continue with questions, just a quick comment. You guys were great in terms of timing and clarity of your presentations, making my job really easy and enjoyable. So that's the first point. Secondly, we can open to the room if you have questions. I have one that I'm going to ask to everyone here. No obligation to comment, but I do have one about the interface between your technical work, be it on policy or the development of tools, with, I wouldn't say general public, but I would say with policymakers, perhaps in other disciplines. Is that something that is easy? Do you want to say something about that importance of going across the aisle to another type of public, as we kind of more say in French? Because I've talked with several colleagues even in the coffee welcome about not always the facility to make these as tangible and comprehensible for the general public outside of your discipline. So in some regards, some we're going to say in a not very eloquent way, it's not very attractive, it's not very sexy issues. So I do want to ask a question about that. No obligation to respond right now because I want to go to the room. Are there any questions? It gives you time to think about it. Are there any questions from the room? Please don't hesitate. We had very interesting presentations. I see some are hesitating. Don't hesitate. Raise your hand. We are here to talk about these issues, how to increase the fluidity and effectiveness of regional cooperation. Let's go to my question then on going to other types of users and targets. Is this something that sometimes is difficult because of the level of expertise and the complexity of the policy? Any volunteer? I see Nicolo is, or maybe Chris, go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. I think the major challenge, let's put it this way, is then in translating the information, the needed information, up the chain, and transmit that information up the chain to decision makers, and that's where we're working. And so, of course, being in the interface between the scientific community and the policy, that's the role we need to play in trying to really translate and make that scientific knowledge and information digestible at a higher level. And that's, of course, not an easy task, but I feel also that in last years of experience, things progressed very well, and that's where we're currently working also with the knowledge products that we're delivering. So that's the overall aim of our work.
I think, Chris, you wanted to respond.
I think just perhaps building on what Nicolo said, it's also about the sort of communication between the different groups. So I mean, I think we know full well that the decision makers, planners, the environmental side, general public, we're talking different language, we're talking different timescales, we're talking different level of knowledge. And we know from the planning perspective up to the decision-making perspective, that alone is enormously challenging because of the different timescales and fundamental language of the work. So I think as Nicolo said, there are initiatives trying to break this down, but and I think as I tried to highlight in my intervention earlier, I think making sure that the decision makers, sectoral leads, data holders are all in the room and involved from the outset, I think is at least a starting point to try to break down those challenges.
Thank you both. I have a question for Justine and then to Rudiger as well. And also, I find very interesting, and I'm sure everyone in the room, and the not only the work but also the type of data and the expertise that you developed and the interface with policies. Let's make no mistake when I say that there is an issue maybe of attractiveness. It's more what kind of role does society play also in pushing us towards continually understanding data and its analyses better. Justine, I enjoyed what you mentioned about the access to stakeholders as well. Are you satisfied with the evolution of the broadness of the CPMR? Is that something that sometimes you wish you had more time for in terms of inclusiveness? Maybe a short comment about that. I mean, what are we talking about in terms of adhering to it, the communication, and so others come in? Just a quick comment about that. Yeah.
Of course, I am happy with that, let's say. But yeah, let's say that at the CPMR, we work both, let's say, with experts in the region and also with politicians. So sometimes it can be indeed quite challenging, especially when there are some topics that are more technical, to translate them into some political messages that are relevant for the politicians. So At the CPMR, we have some specific working group. For example, there is a maritime working group, cohesion working group, so that helps to gather those technicians, let's say, have this technical discussion, and then transfer that into political messages. So that's, yeah. So we manage that, let's say, to gather like everyone all together, and every year there is the General Assembly of the CPMR that gathers all of members to adopt also some specific policy positions and to raise the voice of the regions in that case.
Just to detail, when is the next General Assembly, and is that an opportunity also to be more aware of what the CPMR does in its role?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can visit, of course, our website, and we communicate a lot on LinkedIn about our future activities. And the General Assembly will take place in November in Norway. So, yeah.
Rudiger, you're an international lawyer by training. You understand very well all the legal implications of translating use of data, doing on the ground, on the field work, collective data, then making that intelligible for policy making. Is there a challenge that you want to highlight for the coming months and years regarding any theme, be it climate change, be it geopolitical instability? Is there enough attention on the Baltic Sea, et cetera? Any way you want to tackle that question?
Yes, but if I may, I'd like to come back to your previous question as well.
Of course,
because you had the question of translating this information to policymakers and to the general public. And in that regard, in a way, in HELCOM, we're fortunate because we pride ourselves on being a science-based organization, and our structure facilitates that because we have 3 levels of bodies. We have a governing body, which consists of policymakers who may or may not have a scientific background. Some do, some don't. But then, of course, we need to feed the scientific information into these processes. And for that reason, we also have one level, which is called expert groups and networks. We have 30 of those. They produce, if you like, the pure, unadulterated scientific and technical advice. And then we have working groups, of which we have 8, and they are the ones who translate this to something that's then manageable for the policy level. And they have to do this in such a way that nothing is lost in translation, which means that basically, I think they have the toughest job in the organization. But this is well structured. So in terms of translating this to our policymaking level, I think we're well set up. The problem, I think, lies more in reaching the general public. And that's something that we're not always as good at as we'd like to be. Also because, of course, these issues are not very easy to grasp. That being said, I think MSP is actually one of the issues that's more easily explainable to people than some of the perhaps more abstract and more scientific issues that we're dealing with within HELCOM, right?
Thank you for that. No, go ahead if you wanted to continue, but thank you for that contextualization, saying that we are fortunate, we have work to do, but it is not as difficult as some other issues.
And the various HELCOM bodies also, of course, consists of experts, of scientists, but also of civil society representatives and policymakers. So we have a broad range of people there, and we also engage with stakeholders. So we are doing that. We could still be better at it, obviously. As far as challenges, well, I think there's quite a few challenges coming up. I mentioned that we have all these policy instruments in place. So we have our 2021 Baltic Sea Action Plan. That's our central policy instrument at the moment. Target date is 2030. This Baltic Sea Action Plan contains contains 199 actions spread across 5 segments, 4 thematic segments and 1 horizontal action segment. 3 of those are specifically related to MSP. And they are, and this is significant, in the horizontal action segment, which means that obviously MSP is relevant to all the thematic issues that we deal with across the board. This needs to be implemented. We're working on that. Target date is 2030, which doesn't mean that things are only implemented by 2030. We're working on it as we speak. Of course, the last of those actions need to be implemented by 2030. I think the last MSP action is scheduled for 2028, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me. So that's one thing we have. Then we have, I already mentioned this as well, the joint HELCOM-BASAP MSP roadmap. This contains 5 specific objectives related to MSP and then 27 actions again. So that's the next policy document we have. I mentioned we're reviewing our guidelines for the integration of the ecosystem-based approach into MSP. That's going on as well. We have the base maps, data infrastructure. All of this is in place, but now it needs to be implemented. And obviously that is one of the major challenges we're facing, because having something on paper is a great first step, but then you need to implement it. And that's what we're doing going forward. So the MSP roadmap also has a target date of 2030. Now, then you mentioned additional issues. Is there enough attention on the Baltic Sea? Well, yes and no, I'd say. In some cases, yes. In some cases, maybe not so much. The current geopolitical situation is actually garnering more attention for us because people focus on the Baltic Sea from the geopolitical perspective and then realize there's also an ecosystem out there that needs to be protected. So we're getting more attention for all the wrong reasons. But the geopolitical situation is, of course, affecting us in various ways, institutionally, but also in terms of our practical work. So this is a challenge, obviously. So there's a lot of challenges out there. And then, of course, we have the review of the MSP directive. I'm sorry.
No worries.
And the Ocean Pact and the Ocean Act coming up.
Yeah.
That is something, of course, that will require some rethinking and quite a lot of work. So that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to do things better. So we're living in times of challenges and opportunities, I think, also for HELCOM.
Thank you very much, Justine Boissard, Rudiger Strempel, Nicolas Bassan, and Chris McDougall. We're going to welcome them off the stage, and we're going to continue. You guys are great. Obviously, stay with us. We have many opportunities today to exchange. I'm going to invite onto stage my colleague, my co-animator, Muriel Lux, to talk about a quick video, which is also going to launch us into the second roundtable. Thank you, Muriel. And of course, if you want to make a comment, please feel free.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Ludwig Kapspoel to have sharing these nice videos for the maritime special planning. I think that this video introduced well the topic of today. So I think that I have nothing to say more. Maybe we can
The video is going to speak for itself.
Yeah.
Do I launch it? Good. Thank you,
The
Vincent.
North Sea is transforming. Warming waters and expanding human use are reshaping its ecosystems. Across the region, nations work on common goals. Net zero energy by 2050. Balancing energy, food, shipping, and offshore in harmony with nature. We understand how mobile birds, mammals, and fish use our seas. We also know the effects of different climate change scenarios. Across Europe, planning and restoration decisions lag behind the pace of environmental change. Our scenario tools can build accurate climate projections with the data we have. We can rely on powerful ecosystem models, satellite data, and digital twins development. Europe already holds important knowledge, the means to explore, understand, and act. Habitats shift, species move, and food webs reorganize, with effects reaching beyond the sea itself. These transformations influence water quality, fisheries, and coastal livelihoods, including tourism and food security. Nature protection and restoration is known to counter change. Rebuilding reefs like oysters can make a difference. New modeling and visualization tools turn complexity into clarity. Forecasting the North Seas, they let us test ideas before acting. We see how management choices can affect species, habitats, and communities. Tools like OceanViz reveal the possible futures side by side, helping us with informed action. Through shared science and collaboration, policymakers, researchers, and communities can anticipate change and shape a sustainable North Sea. Supported by EU Horizon research, real-time data, and powerful ecosystem models, we now have the framework to guide the sea's future, together. What remains is putting our expanding tools and knowledge to work, embracing and putting into place climate-smart marine spatial planning to shape the North Sea's future with clarity and confidence.
Thank you very much for the video, for this demonstration, and we're